the News Channel 5 Network, this is Morning Line with Nick Beres.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. Nick Beres here on a Wednesday. Good show on tap for you. I'm going to invite you all to join, as always, in the conversation. Question law enforcement. You know, a regular guest on this program is Davidson County Sheriff Darren Hall. And one of the issues many in law enforcement, whether it's here in Davidson County, wherever you happen to live, or across the country, dealing with right now, staffing shortages, hiring, what it takes to have the proper number of law enforcement officers there to do the job that needs to be done, and we know how important that is. That's one of a few things we'll talk about this morning, and you know, there's various individuals involved in this. There's police chiefs, there's sheriffs, and as you know as well, there's the police officers themselves, many times obviously represented, depending on the entity they work for, a union. And here in Davidson County, we have the Fraternal Order of Police, and with that, we have the president, who's been the president, I didn't realize, I thought it was even longer than this, since 2016, president of the FOP, James Smallwood. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning. Good to be here.
He just sat down because he was making his way in with traffic. Was it a wreck out there?
Several. Yeah, several.
I appreciate you making it. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
I haven't seen you in a while, and it's 2016 you've been with the FOP, right? Is that right?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
The bio on that?
Yeah.
It almost seemed like, I mean, we've talked to you and you've been in the middle of so many discussions, issues over the top, but we'll let folks, at first, if you would, just explain to our viewers, I think we've all heard, and I certainly know, what the FOP is about. Let them know what you and the organization does to represent law enforcement officers here in the county.
Yeah, sure. So the FOP is a representative entity of more than 2,000 members in Nashville, Tennessee, and that comprises of active law enforcement officers in Metro Nashville Police Department, as well as other agencies in the region, and also the retired officers and some associate members who have associated or affiliated themselves with the FOP. On top of that, we have several community outreach mechanisms where we continue to support at-risk youth in our community through the Andrew Jackson Police Youth Camp. We hold 6 free youth camps in the summer.
That's awesome.
We also do Shop with a Cop, or now it's called Cops and Kids, where we'll take low-income families and their kids shopping for holiday every year, and we've taken about 225 kids every year doing that. So we're well invested in our community. We're well invested in representing our officers and making sure that the public safety priorities in Nashville are at the top of the list, and we continue to promote that. So.
Yep. And as far as police officers, when a new police officer is hired, are all the officers in Metro part of the union? Is it optional? Are there some that choose not to? Or how does it work out? Is the majority?
Yeah, it's certainly an optional thing. So the majority of police officers in Nashville are members of the Fraternal Order of Police, but nobody's mandated to be a member.
Yeah, and again, the union, I think, as you would say, if you're in law enforcement, your number one priority is to protect and serve, and that's public safety number one. But the union looks out for the interests of law enforcement officers as well, correct?
Well, yeah, we look out for the interests of law enforcement officers, but the interest of law enforcement officers is public safety in the community. We wouldn't be doing this job if we didn't care.
And what you're interested in is having the tools you need to do it as best and effectively as possible.
Absolutely.
All right, so let's talk about one of the main issues right at the top. And boy, I'll tell you, Sheriff Darren Hall, he was talking about it, and I know law enforcement across the board, for a variety of reasons, has had trouble either with retention or hiring. The staffing issues right now, Metro Davidson County, how does it look for police officers?
You know, there was a time long ago when there were 3 applicants for every 1 available position in the police department, and unfortunately that position is completely reversed. There's 1 applicant for every 3 vacancies in the department. Staffing has been a crisis for the police department here and across the country for quite some time now, and a lot of that relates back to how we're treating our police officers, the equipment we're giving them, the pay that's not comparable with other agencies across the country. But the reality is we cannot get the people in the door to do the job we need, and today the police department sits 212 officers short from their budgeted manpower. So this is something that we need to pay super focus on, make sure that we're doing everything we can to promote the job, to promote working conditions, benefits, and pay, so that we can attract the best and brightest and retain the ones that we have here.
So you just touched on a bunch of the reasons as to why. What does a incoming cadet or law enforcement officer start at in Davidson County?
You're looking at somewhere in the low 50s for an incoming cadet, and I don't have the number right off the top of my head.
Which is not horrible.
Yeah.
It's not horrible.
It's not horrible, but when you're in Nashville,
this is a major market.
When you're in Nashville, the cost of living is $80,000, and so you're way behind the curve. And when you're comparing, so we're now in Nashville, we're no longer comparing with our region. We're comparing with departments all across the country, because what applicants and candidates for police officers are doing are looking at all the police departments across the country.
They're going where they pay the most.
Yeah, they're going, what does Columbus pay? What does Las Vegas pay? What does Miami pay? If I want to be in a major city, I'm going to go to the major city that treats their police officers well. I'm going to go to a state that supports police officers, and I'm going to make sure that I can afford to live. I can afford to buy a house and raise a family and be invested in my community. And they're looking at all these things. And then secondary to that, they're looking at what are the working conditions in that police department. And am I working 80 hours a week? Do I have the equipment I need? Do I have everything that I need to get the job done in an efficient and effective manner? And they're making these informed decisions. So Nashville, rather than being median market, we have to be that shining city on a hill. We have to set the standard rather than try to catch up to it. Right now, we're trying to catch up to it.
Do law enforcement officers, when they look for jobs, maybe call around, check with the staff that's there, and try to get a sense from behind the scenes, things that maybe I wouldn't be aware of, but maybe talk to other officers? What's morale like? What's the chief like? How are you viewed in the community? And we know in some communities there may be, and then here too, depending on where you are, there can be an adversarial relationship with law enforcement that can make it a little more difficult. Do they do that? Is that part of the equation?
They absolutely do. I get calls multiple times a week. I know that the police department's getting calls multiple times a week. When people come to visit Nashville, they will stop an officer on the street and they'll ask those questions. Hey, what's morale like here? How often are you working? How often are you being forced to work overtime? How often are you home? What's your pay? Do you feel comfortable here? Do you feel like the community respects you here? All those questions are being asked, and those officers, those candidates that are looking for a job are making those decisions based on those questions and answers that they're getting.
You probably have a pulse on this more than anyone else. You know, being president of the FOP, you deal with all the officers. How would you characterize the morale right now with this police department? Relatively new police chief now. There was finally a change. How are things in the department?
It's an interesting question, and it comes with an interesting dynamic, right? We have a new administration. We have a police chief who is, I believe, firmly doing everything he can to turn the corner on that. But the reality is, we have somewhere around 1,390 police officers in Metro Nashville. Okay. We haven't had that number since 2012, 2013. So you've seen exponential, explosive growth in the city. You've seen exponential demand on the officers of the city increase. I mean, we're doing the same thing. We're being asked to do more with less every single year.
When you say 1,390 is the number we haven't been at, what was the number typically in the past?
So we have been holding it around 1510, 1511. So that's been our budgeted number.
Yeah, I mean, technically you say you're 212 officers short maybe for main, just keeping your head above water, which is scary to think of it. But in the past, you typically were up around 15,000 officers. So you're down more
1,500.
than 1,500.
We'd love to have 15,000.
I'm sorry, 1,500. But if you're at 1,390, you're down more than 1,000 for what it was at one of the high points.
Yeah, we are down a significant portion right now, and that is part of the drive of our morale, right? We have to bring people in to work overtime just to cover shifts, just to make sure that we're getting the calls answered on the street. Not to mention, every special event that we have here requires police security. Everything that we do in Nashville requires some level of public safety promotion. So we have to bring people in to work those. They're being pulled away from their families. They're being pulled away from their personal interests, their hobbies. They don't get enough time to decompress. So all of these things compound, and that, I think, is the driving factor on morale, on top of some of these issues you see in the community where there are folks that are out there actively trying to drive a wedge between the police department and the community they serve. Both of those things play a factor in our morale. So right now, morale in the police department is certainly not where it should be. It is down, and we need to work hard to promote it and get it back up. But it's going to take investment from everywhere.
You know, one way to, I think, and I think the public, if you took a poll, would say, yeah, we want to pay what we can, because, you know, number one on the list of most issues is public safety and knowing you're safe in your own home or where you live. So, for instance, we were talking about this yesterday with someone. I know because of the shortage of staff, your law enforcement officers are focused on the most serious crimes, these horrible carjackings, the shootings, all these other things. Now, the way I understand it, and you correct me if I'm wrong, if I get an offender bender on the drive home today, okay, and I'm thinking, oh, I got an offender bender, it's not a crime, no one's seriously injured, but it's a wreck and both cars are messed up. I'm thinking, all right, I got to file a police report because I need it for my insurance. cop ain't coming, or I can call and ask for a law enforcement officer to come by, and I'm going to be told, listen, you can file online, you'll get the report that way, you can submit that. If you insist on a police officer, you may be out there 7 hours before someone shows up.
Yeah, so one of the things that this police department prides itself on
Which, by the way, I have no problem with that.
Yeah.
I don't want you responding to fender benders.
Sure.
Okay, but go on.
Yeah, but one of the things we pride ourselves on is if you call for help, we're coming. And if you say, I absolutely need help, we're coming. The reality of that is, especially now when we're looking at this deficit in manpower, it's going to take us time on some of these lower priority calls. It's not to say it's not a priority, but if we have violent crime or a serious incident where somebody needs us in seconds, we're going to have to prioritize those calls in that manner.
Yeah, I would think a fender bender where no one's hurt and no crime, one, should not be a 911 call, and two, is low on the list of priorities.
Correct. Yeah, if you're in a fender bender, nobody's injured, you should be calling 862-8600, not 911. Right. So now we've implemented this self-reporting feature that you can go online, submit the report, so on and so forth. And that has resulted in, I believe, a 29% reduction in responses to traffic crashes where there's no injury and a police officer isn't needed. I think that number transposes into somewhere around 1,400 crash reports that have been done by people who have submitted them online or whatever. That's thousands and thousands and thousands of man hours reduced that we can be, prioritizing to other things that are a little bit more significant in the community. So it's a big difference.
They can be out on the streets instead of filling out paperwork after the fact. Listen, we'll take a break, and when we come back, I want to get into some of the ideas about trying to attract and just how low you can get in terms of officer shortage before it really becomes a crisis. And you may say it already is. And we can take some phone calls if you have questions. He is president of the FOP, representing law enforcement officers here in Nashville, 737-7587. We'll be back with more with James Smallwood right after this.